If the reason you believe you were erased from your own family could be proven false, would that change anything? Because that's the quiet, unsettling question sitting at the center of this case. Not the bloodshed, not the charges, not even the arrests, but the belief, the story someone carried for years, the story that may or may not have been true. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. On Sunday night, 2 people were found dead inside a $13.5 million Brentwood estate. Rob Reiner, 78. Michelle Reiner, 70. Stabbed. Inside their own home. The kind of headline that feels unreal even as you read it. The kind that forces you to reread names, ages, addresses, just to be sure your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. Their son, Nick Reiner, 32, was arrested that same night. He lived on the property, in the guest house. He's now charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. And almost immediately, a reason began circulating. A motive that felt disturbingly simple, disturbingly human. I was never in the will. That line, reported, repeated, dissected, has become the spine of this story. The explanation many people reached for without hesitation. A son, a fortune, a betrayal, a breaking point. But here's the problem. Simple motives are rarely simple. And in cases like this, what people believe matters just as much as what can be proven. This is not a story about a will. Not really. It's about what inheritance represents. About recognition. About power inside families that appear untouchable from the outside. It's about how belief hardens over time. How it becomes memory, then certainty, then justification. And it's about a single night that forced a private family fracture into public view, where nothing is allowed to remain ambiguous anymore. Not even grief. The first thing you should know is this. Almost everything about this case is being filtered through interpretation. Police statements, court filings, media reports, family accounts. Each one carries its own weight. Each one leaves something out. So we're going to move carefully here. No shouting. No rushed conclusions. No pretending we know what hasn't been proven. Because if you rush this story, you miss the part that actually matters. The night the bodies were discovered wasn't loud in the way crime shows train us to expect. There were no chase scenes playing out on live television. No dramatic press conferences in the first hour. What we have instead are fragments. Timestamps. Secondhand statements. A phone call. A family member telling police there was someone dangerous in the family. Someone who should be a suspect. That sentence alone changed everything. Not because it named anyone outright, but because it reframed the entire situation before investigators even stepped fully inside the house. When suspicion comes from inside a family, it carries a different gravity. It suggests history, fear that didn't start that night, tension that had already crossed a line. And yet, even that detail raises uncomfortable questions. What kind of family dynamic leads someone to say that? How long does fear have to exist before it becomes normalized? Before it feels logical to speak it aloud to police? And why, out of all possible motives, did the narrative of the will rise so quickly to the surface? The public latched onto it almost immediately, maybe because it fits a familiar framework. Money, entitlement, rage. A storyline we've seen before, one that lets us put events into clean boxes and move on. But families don't work like that. Families don't break in straight lines. They fracture quietly, over dinner tables, over silences, over things that are never clarified because clarifying them would force confrontation. In wealthy families especially, power isn't always exercised openly. Sometimes it's indirect. Who gets access? Who gets information? Who is kept waiting? Who is told, later? Who is told nothing at all? And if you grow up inside that system, you learn quickly that absence can feel intentional. Silence can feel like punishment. Here's what we know and what we don't. Nick Reiner lived on the property, but not inside the main house. The guest house. Close enough to see. Close enough to feel included. Separate enough to feel excluded. That detail matters more than it seems. Proximity without authority creates tension. It always has. Living near power, but not inside it, changes how people interpret every interaction. Every closed door. Every decision they're not part of. If you've ever lived in the orbit of someone who controlled resources you depended on, you already understand this. Now layer in inheritance. Not just money, but legacy, validation, proof that you mattered enough to be named. When someone believes they were cut out of that future, the emotional fallout doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like fixation, obsession, rewriting the past to make sense of the present. And that's where this story becomes dangerous. Because belief, once solidified, does not require confirmation. It only requires repetition. The reports suggest Nick believed he had been lied to about the will, that he had been told one thing, only to discover another. That discovery, real or perceived, has been framed as the breaking point. But we have to pause here. Belief does not equal fact, and belief does not equal motive. What did he actually know? What was he told? What did he assume? What did he misunderstand? What changed over time? These are not minor distinctions. They are the entire case. And yet, in the rush to explain the unexplainable, nuance gets flattened. Headlines turn questions into conclusions. Motives become slogans. The will did it. The money did it. The entitlement did it. But that explanation is too neat, too comfortable. It lets everyone else off the hook. Because if this story is really about a will, then it's an anomaly, a rare explosion of greed, a singular monster. If it's about something deeper, recognition, resentment, perceived erasure, then it's far more unsettling. Because it means the warning signs were emotional, not financial. Subtle, easy to ignore, easy to misread. And that brings us back to why this story matters now. Not because of who the Reiners were. Not because of the price of the house. Not even because of the brutality of the crime. It matters because it forces a question we're uncomfortable asking. How well do we really understand the people closest to us? How often do families mistake quiet withdrawal for stability? How often does someone's silence get interpreted as calm when it's actually calculation? And how often do we only start asking these questions after it's too late? There's also the issue of timing. Why now? Why did this rupture occur when it did? Cases like this don't emerge in a vacuum. They surface after something shifts. A conversation, a realization, a perceived betrayal that tips the balance from resentment to action. And while reports point toward inheritance as that trigger, triggers are rarely singular. They are accumulations. The danger of focusing on the will too early is that it distracts from the slow burn underneath it. The years of unresolved tension. The dynamics no one wanted to confront because confronting them would mean admitting something was already broken. There's another uncomfortable layer here as well. The speed with which narratives harden. Within hours, people online had already decided who Nick Reiner was. What kind of person he must be. What kind of son would do this? But criminal charges are not verdicts. And understanding is not endorsement. You can acknowledge complexity without excusing harm. You can examine motive without justifying violence. And you can ask hard questions without answering them prematurely. That's what this investigation is about. Not declaring truth, but tracing how belief, family power, and silence intersect in ways that can turn catastrophic. Because somewhere inside this story is a moment where something could have been said, clarified, addressed. A moment that passed quietly, unnoticed, dismissed as unimportant. And that moment, whatever it was, may matter more than the night everything ended. So before we move forward, before we dissect statements and timelines and alleged admissions, we need to step back. We need to understand the family structure, the relationships, the emotional economy inside that house. Because the violence didn't start with a weapon. It started with a story someone told themselves. And the most chilling part? Once someone believes they've already lost everything, the future stops functioning as a deterrent. But here's the part no one is talking about yet. The will may not have been the first line Nick believed, and it may not have been the one that mattered most. There's a pattern in families like this, wealthy, prominent, tightly observed from the outside, but not fully understood from the inside. A pattern of small exclusions, subtle slights, moments that feel minor when they happen but accumulate into something larger over years. A door left closed, a meeting never scheduled, a compliment given to someone else. For most families, these things are forgotten quickly. For some, they linger. They fester. They grow roots in the imagination until reality itself becomes negotiable. Nick Reiner reportedly lived in the guest house on the property. A detail that sounds mundane, almost irrelevant, until you start thinking about proximity and access. Being close but not inside creates a strange kind of tension. You see everything, hear everything, but your input is limited. You watch rituals, interactions, moments of connection, and always from the outside. For someone with strong attachment to recognition, that separation can feel like exclusion. And then there's the role of inheritance. Money is only one part of it. Inheritance is also symbolic. Being left out of a will isn't just about financial deprivation. It can feel like erasure. A statement that says, you don't matter here. Your life, your contributions, your existence within this family are less than, or worse, invisible. And once that belief takes hold, it colors every interaction that comes after. We have to pause on the notion of belief because it's central. The line reported in multiple media outlets, "I was never in it," could be read in multiple ways. Financial grievance, emotional grievance, both at once. But what does it mean when someone internalizes that line for years? When it becomes not just a statement about a will, but a lens for interpreting every gesture, every silence, every passing glance. Because perception is reality, at least in the mind of the person perceiving it. And when perception and reality diverge sharply, consequences can be unpredictable. Police statements suggest that Nick's sister, Romy, was the one who discovered their parents' bodies. She reportedly told investigators that there was a dangerous family member who should be a suspect. That phrasing is precise and deliberate. Dangerous. Should be a suspect. It's not a casual observation. It signals prior awareness of tension, perhaps even prior fear. It hints at dynamics that have existed quietly, hidden from public scrutiny, for years. What's important is how quickly that suspicion becomes a narrative. In the hours and days after discovery, the media gravitates towards simple explanations. Money, greed, entitlement. Those are easy to digest. They fit the template. But what if the underlying issue isn't so straightforward? What if it's not simply a matter of being left out of a will? What if it's a matter of feeling invisible, unrecognized, dismissed by the people whose approval matters most? Consider this. Nick allegedly felt betrayed by the will. That belief could have started with a conversation, a passing remark, or even an interpretation of silence. Families rarely announce emotional estrangement. They leave hints, small gestures, words left unsaid. And sometimes those omissions speak louder than declarations. We also need to think about timing. The event didn't occur randomly. There's a cadence to escalation, subtle, almost imperceptible at first. The narrative builds incrementally. One moment feels minor, the next feels amplified, until something breaks. The tragedy here is that nobody outside could predict exactly when or how the breaking point would arrive, but in retrospect, the signals were present. And yet, even with all this analysis, there's ambiguity. Ambiguity that is hard to reconcile. Ambiguity that haunts every report, every statement, every line in the media. The admissions, the alleged motives, the reports of emotional strain. All of it exists alongside facts that are still unverified or contested. That tension between what is reported and what is true creates an almost unbearable uncertainty. It's important to note that premeditation in first-degree murder charges doesn't require meticulous planning for years. It requires proof of intent. Intent can be shaped by perception, by belief, by a cumulative sense of grievance. And here, the alleged admission about the will, whatever its legal weight, intersects with that perception. It adds a layer of potential motive, but it doesn't explain everything. What's left unsaid is as revealing as what has been spoken. Why was Nick allegedly so focused on the will? Was it about money, recognition, or a deeper sense of erasure? Did he believe he had been wronged long before anyone picked up a phone? Did he see opportunities for reconciliation and reject them? Or did he believe reconciliation was impossible before it was even attempted? And the irony is unavoidable. The very document meant to codify family legacy, the will, is also one of the few tangible ways to measure perceived inclusion. It is, in essence, both a symbol and a tool. But symbols are fragile. Tools can be misused. And when the line between the two blurs, tragedy can emerge from spaces that seemed ordinary, even safe. This case also challenges how we understand public versus private personas. Rob and Michelle Reiner had decades of life behind them. They cultivated an image, managed their social sphere, maintained appearances. But public warmth does not guarantee private harmony. Private harmony is fragile, often invisible, and deeply susceptible to misinterpretation. And therein lies the first uncomfortable truth. We can never fully know the emotional universe of another person. We rely on fragments, second-hand accounts, our own interpretations. We see outcomes and try to reconstruct causes. But reconstruction is imperfect. It's messy. And yet, in cases like this, the pressure to construct a coherent narrative is immense. So as we move forward, dissecting reports, timelines, and alleged statements, it's critical to remain aware of what is unknown, what remains hidden, what exists only in the intersection of perception and reality. Because the most pivotal moments may have occurred quietly, without witnesses, without documentation. And those moments, unseen, unspoken, may ultimately define the story more than the events of the night itself.